Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Bapon from Tonkin and Taylor, New Zealand. So I'll be sharing about a coastal community resilience index framework that we have applied a couple of Pacific country as well as here in New Zealand. Obviously, when you're talking about a compounding and cascading risk or cascading hazard, the year may be started with everyone's knowledge, the biggest Tonga volcanic eruption, which gives us a quite good understanding actually what are the limitations on science to understanding all this complex hazard and dealing with a compounding and cascading effect of each of those hazards. So you can see on the left side the way that Tonga volcanic eruption happened when the country was actually having a cyclone impact, and then the volcanic eruption happened. It created a tsunami, and then followed by a series of earthquake, more than 70 earthquake, and then the pandemic arrived in the country through the relief operation. So, which actually makes quite compounding and cascading impact to the overall society. But however, if you try to look at the damage and casualty for this particular event, there were only 4 people actually killed with this event, and there was not a huge injury or physical asset damage. And this gives a quite good understanding that how the traditional knowledge actually helps to the community to better understand, better prepared, and better response, and how an early warning and also a systematic risk register and resilience framework applied throughout the community to better prepared by themselves. Obviously, coastal community has a quite highly exposure to coastal related hazard, and also quite exposed as we lived in a very small island community. Coastal community resilience, the ability to communities alongside the coast. We also deals with heavy climate change related impacts for sea level rise, as well as other climate related extreme weather event. And obviously, due to the development, urbanization, as well as mixed well-being, it makes quite challenging overall actually living space or livable space for a small community. Obviously, how you want to measure the resilience, even though we try to develop several, say, strategy, plan, SOP, contingency, business continuity, so many things, but we need to measure some of those aspects so that we can actually manage those kind of risk. And looking at that, I just shared a couple of framework that we exist, but within the framework, how we actually want to measure. So that's what actually the target for developing this resilience framework. And here, resilience in terms of natural, biological, technological, and man-made hazard we try to look at. And then how we can try to develop a couple of indicators so that actually it could give you a better understanding that what is your status in terms of not only just hazard aspect, but also other secondary and tertiary related aspect. So just before jumping into the resilience framework itself, if you try to look at the urban aspect, as I mentioned, that the urban also makes quite complex scenario because of economy, population growth, and others. I mean, recently with the Sustainable Development Goal or with the 100 Resilient City or Making City Resilience, those kind of program, we try to look at more on multidimensional or more transdisciplinary as well as emerging issues. But if you look at from the time memorial, say from 2000 onward, there are actually several branding to promote the resilience in terms of city or urban aspect, but each of them has a differential aspect, different focused, and it didn't able to actually make a quite comprehensive indicator, comprehensive measures to better prepare a community resilience. When we look at the human dimension, natural environment, economy, built environment, and governance, you can see actually there are actually a lot of yellow, green, and red. So red means like you actually look at major focus area. the green means you actually look at the minimum focus area. And as I said that recently with the SDG looking at 2030, we try to look at more comprehensively how actually we try to make our city resilient. And on the other side, if you go to the framework related or guidance related to coastal community resilience, there may be thousands of document guidelines you may find that has been developed by various development partners, research organization, private entity, but none of those actually able to, if you try to come up with a baseline indicator, it doesn't able to actually cross-reference or match every single, none of those framework able to cover all the aspect of a coastal resilience or coastal community demand aspect. So there are always some lacking, and there is no one size that could actually fit for all. But we try to populate those indicator that other framework has been described and try to see how actually that matching with 0% to 100% within a various percentage wise. And we try to put a baseline, a 2007 coastal community resilience, which actually we developed after the 2004 tsunami. And in that 2004 tsunami as coastal community resilience, we try to look at 115 benchmark to making sure that we are not only looking at the hazard aspect, we are actually looking at land use, we are looking at environment, we are looking at coastal dynamics, coastal morphology, everything onto it. And when you try to summarize that as a baseline and how actually all other frameworks that has been developed after 2007 to 2020, you can see actually there are very few actually frameworks which can actually able to capture 80 to 100% within the domain area. One of those could be the flood resilience measure for communities, which is developed by FRMC in the Pacific. There are actually IFRC flood resilience toolbox that's quite useful. Build Back Better framework by University of Auckland, as well as the 100 city resilience that covers a couple of areas. And then based upon that things, we try to come up with a 6 domain, which is social, built environment, cultural, economy, as well as natural environment, and governance could be hard because governance has the interconnectivity between all the domain here. And then each of those domain they have elements. So we just try to put a couple of those elements: community, climate change, and risk knowledge. And then each of those has several indicators so that actually you can make sure that what are the status or how you can actually monitor those indicators in terms of their resilience index. And another aspect is that when you're looking at all the domain aspects, so we try to look at social, built environment, cultural, economic, and natural environment, but there is also a process of developing those things, which is how the preventive measure has been taken, what are the anticipative, absorptive, and adaptive capacity has been linked up. So we often actually try to forget the process. We try to bring the capital to measure our resilience. And that's why maybe the gaps remains there. And the governance is always, we try to put as a core, because without a governance system, a strong governance system, either at the national level to the local level, wherever you want to measure your resilience, it needs to have it properly integrated with all the processes as well as with the capitals. And finally, as a New Zealander, we also quite believe on our traditional knowledge, our Papa Maori traditional knowledge. And within our Maori culture, we always believe that everything has interconnected. And so we need to actually look at the resilience more on holistic aspect, integrated and cohesive, linking with disaster, climate change adaptation, and development, as we learn through our culture. And then the coastal community resilience guides also allows and key ingredient for resilience to be effective and efficiently measure actually what are your status at the community and where is your gaps and how actually you can actually improve over the period of times, whatever the gaps remains there. And that's the good way to understanding your vulnerability and actually become more resistant to any kind of hazard that you may have in your geographical areas. I think that's basically my talk. Please feel free to ask me any questions if you have.